Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here on this Friday. I'm so ready for the weekend. I plan on being lazy. Sometimes it's nice just to not have a single plan for a couple of days. We are going to jump into our music fact of the day. We got a few things to cover. And then later this evening, I'll be doing an update on the Caitlin Armstrong trial. It may be a little late before that gets out, but it is coming. So, music fact. What was the number one song played on U.S. radio during the 2000s decade? That would be Nickelback's How You Remind Me. It was played 1.2 million times on the radio during that decade. So just a few quick updates. Yesterday, Keefe D finally had his arraignment in a Las Vegas court. He pled not guilty and waived his right to a speedy trial. So the judge said that she would likely appoint him a public defender, and the hearing was over. Speaking of arraignments, Shanna Gardner was arraigned today finally after being extradited from Washington State earlier last month. She was arraigned on first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation, and child abuse. She pled not guilty. Now, get this. She has hired Jose Baez as her attorney. And as you know, Jose Baez is kind of a miracle worker when it comes to high profile clients. He got Casey Anthony off. Will it work for Shanna? We will see. Jared's father and sister gave a statement following the arraignment. If Jared was here today, he would look out at everyone, smile, and express his appreciation to you. But he's not here today. Almost 2 years ago, my wife and I lost our youngest son to murder. Our children lost their dear brother. His wife, Kirsten, lost the love of her life. Jared's children lost their father. His death has impacted many. The outpouring of support for Jared has been overwhelming and heartfelt. Jared was quiet, full of love, and one of the best fathers you could imagine. I think those responsible thought no one would care about Jared, but his family cared. All of his children cared, our community cared, and so did many wonderful people from all over the country. We cannot thank you enough for your love, prayers, and support that you've given us. We are eager, as I'm sure you are, for the full truth to come out. We are very confident the state attorney will ultimately provide justice for Jared. Thank you. Shanna's family is very, very wealthy. They clearly have the money to hire the best of the best. And Jose Baez, one of the big ones. We'll see what happens there. Kouri Richins is due back in court this afternoon at 3:30. Those motions that are going to be heard is the state's motion for a no contact order. They're expected to discuss whether or not Kouri can still communicate with her mom and her brother after this infamous 6-page wag the dog letter was discovered in her cell. Prosecutors allege that letter is not a novel she's writing, as she claims, but more of a way to tamper with witnesses. They're also going to hear the defendant's motion to enforce the order and contempt for sanctions. The defense motion to dismiss due to the prosecutor's misconduct. They say this was privileged information because it was in or under an envelope that had some communication to her attorney. So I'll let you know the status of that hearing and what happens. Earlier this week, Richard Allen had another hearing. And just before the hearing started, Allen's former attorneys walked in and sat right down at the defense table. People that were in the courtroom said that Judge Gall looked a little perturbed that they did that. Their attorney, David Hennessy, was with them as well. Prosecutor Nicholas McLeland went out of the courtroom and then came back in with a deputy, pointed in the direction of Allen's former attorneys, and then walked out again. Former attorneys Baldwin and Rossi then went to the back where Richard was being held. The new attorney came in and spoke to Baldwin and his attorney, Mr. Hennessy. Judge Gall comes in, Allen comes in, and then the hearing was underway. Attorney Rossi told the judge that Allen has asked that he and Mr. Baldwin still be able to represent him. Judge Gall reminded the attorneys that they withdrew and asked, what's changed? Rossi said, you left us no choice. He said their professional intention was to withdraw. That was a strategic move to protect Richard Allen's rights to counsel while attempting to intervene in what they saw as the court's violation of Richard Allen's due process. He said that once he and attorney Baldwin were back on the case, the new public defenders should tap out and let the original team proceed with their defense. The judge then responded, nothing's changed. Rossi responded that he and Baldwin did not act with gross negligence, which is her reasoning for asking them or forcing them them to withdraw off that case. He said they're just on a different page. The prosecutor said the defense was grossly negligent and listed several things, including 2 evidence leaks, an aggressive statement defending Allen's innocence, and lies contained in their motion to try and get the search warrant thrown out, as well as the Odinism defense strategy where they claim members of this pagan religion killed the girls as part of a sacrifice. He said they're trying to put that narrative into the media and into the public eye. Mission accomplished. It's out there. Judge Gall spoke to Richard Allen. She said, "Mr. Allen, I understand you want them back, but I have grave concerns. I know what you want, but cannot and will not allow them to represent you. I cannot allow that." She talks about gross negligence on behalf of the original defense team and told Richard Allen that his new attorneys would now defend him. That is Mr. Labrato and Mr. Screamin. She granted the new defense team's motion to delay that trial. We know it was set for January, just a few months from now. And then she told Allen she was sorry that this happened. Rozzi and Baldwin said they would give all the evidence to the state by the end of the week. Judge Gull said she will start jury selection in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and the trial is set to start October 15th of next year. She has set 2 weeks aside for that trial. A Frank's motion to dismiss the search warrant and suppression motion filed by the former defense attorneys, those are still pending. Baldwin asked if their attorney could address the court, and Judge Gull allowed that. Hennessy said that his attorneys were not prepared for the ambush by her in her chambers on October 19th. He said if she had allowed them to defend themselves the day she told them to withdraw, that the public defender's counsel and other court officers would speak of the pair's professionalism. Hennessy said that the summary ruling violates the Constitution and is unfair to Mr. Allen. He says the attorneys are only guilty of a zealous defense for Mr. Allen and that the Frank's motion to dismiss the evidence investigators say links Allen to the murder scene was a work of art. Judge Gull interrupted Mr. Hennessy and said the issue wasn't the Frank's motion. It's the lawyer's dismissal, and she said he was not to talk about the motion again. Hennessy said the motion's construction showed the former defense attorney's competency opposed to Judge Gull finding gross negligence with the representation of Richard Allen. He also said that he wasn't allowed in her chambers and he couldn't address her allegations in real time against Allen's former attorneys. What did she do? She formally removes the 2 of them from the case. Hennessy said, didn't expect to change her mind. So after the hearing, attorney Baldwin spoke to reporters and he said, journalism. Now is the time for journalists to do their job. On Monday, a group of attorneys who have nothing to do with Allen's case filed a writ of mandamus asking the Idaho Supreme Court to look at Judge Gull's handling of the case. They specified the publication of motions and other filings in the court docket. Just a few hours after court was over, Hennessy filed a withdrawal of a limited appearance and stated judicial overreach made his representation moot. This is such a mess. And ultimately, we know that Rozzi asked to have Judge Gull thrown off the case. He wants a new judge. He said she's biased. Ultimately, what we want is a fair trial that is fair to Richard Allen, regardless of how you feel. It's what we do in this country. Everybody gets the right to a fair trial. We don't want this coming back on appeal and getting overturned. It's going to be interesting to see if Rozzi, especially, who seems to be the one fighting this the hardest, what he does next. So now we are moving on to Alec Murdaugh. He has officially filed for a new trial. This comes after allegations of tampering by the clerk of court, Becky Hill. That motion for a new trial was filed on October 27th. That 74-page motion, by the way, was received by Becky Hill. She signed off on it. In the motion, it says, specifically during trial, the Colleton County Clerk of Court, Rebecca Hill, instructed jurors not to be misled by the evidence presented in Mr. Murdaugh's defense. She told jurors not to be fooled by Mr. Murdaugh's testimony in his own defense. Ms. Hill had frequent private conversations with the jury foreperson, a court-appointed substitution for the foreperson the jury elected for itself at the request of Ms. Hill. During the trial, Ms. Hill asked jurors about their opinions about Mr. Murdaugh's guilt or innocence. Ms. Hill invented a story about a Facebook post to remove a juror she believed might vote not guilty. Ms. Hill pressured the jurors to reach a quick verdict, telling them from the outset of their deliberations it shouldn't take them long. Miss Hill did these things to secure a book deal for herself and media appearances that would not happen in the event of a mistrial. Little clarification there. I just want to point out her book was self-published. She didn't have a book deal. She funded that herself. Miss Hill betrayed her oath of office for money and fame. Once these facts are proven, the law does not allow the court any discretion about how to respond. It must grant a new trial. Exhibits in the motion are copies of Facebook posts, media agreements for a documentary appearance signed by Becky Hill, and excerpts from Hill's recent book about the murder trial, which is titled Behind the Doors of Justice. Well, what happens next? Well, it's up to a circuit court judge. Either that circuit court judge can ask for a evidentiary hearing, or they can just flat out deny the motion. I have a really good feeling that Jim Griffin and Dick Harpootlian will take that to a higher court to fight. And if there is an evidentiary hearing, your girl will be right there in the seat. If a hearing were to happen, you would see jurors, Becky Hill, and possibly Judge Newman testify under oath. Some of the discovery they may ask for would be cell phone records, text messages, call logs, and emails. Alec's attorneys, Jim Griffin and Dick Harpootlian, have alleged that some jurors even had a group text going on. Also, his attorneys want Judge Newman kicked off the case, not only for this possible new trial, but also upcoming financial crimes trials. His defense said that Judge Newman could likely be a witness in this due to his interactions with Becky Hill, as well as being a material witness to her actions during the trial. They also referenced post-trial interviews Judge Newman did, where he discusses his opinion on the case and his opinions on Alec Murdaugh being found guilty. A couple of examples are his comments to the jury after they reached their guilty verdict, where he said, quote, "All the evidence pointing to only one conclusion, and that's the conclusion you all have reached," end quote. In addition, when speaking at his alma mater, Judge Newman said, "Murdaugh committed an unforgivable, unimaginable crime, and there is no way he'll be able to sleep peacefully." They're not suggesting that Judge Newman did anything wrong during the course of the trial itself. He's also set to retire at the end of the year. He's aging out as a judge. It's going to be interesting to see if he just recuses himself from the case or if they go through the motions and he's actually removed. Alec's attorneys speculated that due to Judge Newman's impending retirement, he may have felt free to discuss his opinions, since at the time, any appeal issues that would have come, it would have been long after he was off the bench. But this matter is urgent and will need to be heard sooner than later. Alec's attorneys also said, in their opinion, they think Judge Newman broke judicial rules in speaking out about the case, but they're not looking to punish him. Prosecutors don't believe Judge Newman should be removed. They think it would be expensive, a big hassle. Got to get a new judge caught up on everything. Alec's attorneys have also asked the Supreme Court to suspend any trials or even any hearings about Alec's case until the decision of if Newman should be removed can be heard and ruled on. So that's it for the latest in the Alec Murdaugh never-ending saga. Between this and everything else, y'all, it's going to be a hot minute before this guy just goes away. And just a little update. I checked yesterday and it looks like Blaze Thibodeau's mom, Spring Thibodeau, and uncle Brooke Hale are still incarcerated at the Fairbanks, Alaska jail. We are waiting for them to be extradited to Gilbert, Arizona, and I'm keeping an eye on that to let you know what happens. So let's move on and talk about Bryan Kohberger. Earlier this week, the FBI was at the house using that Faro scanner to get their own measurements. And yesterday, there was a hearing about the DNA evidence. The state said they've asked the FBI for the DNA genealogy information. However, that process can take about a month to receive it. They're also trying to get the report from the private lab that worked on that DNA. They used family DNA through some website, we don't know which one, where they were able to build a family tree that ultimately led to Bryan Kohberger. Now, the defense doesn't like this at all for a lot of reasons. They're not sure that the proper protocol was followed or that the correct website was used. Some of these places you have to opt in to allow law enforcement to look at your DNA. So there's some questions about that, I think. I don't think that's been resolved yet. And also, they're worried that some of his relatives may have their names exposed at no fault of their own. This is a high-profile case. The last thing that the state wants is for people associated with Bryan by DNA to start to get badgered by the media or anything like that. The judge would prefer to review all the DNA evidence at the same time, and he says December 31st is the deadline that he's going to set to have all that submitted to the court. We're going to move on to Rachel Morin. It's been so long, you guys, since this beautiful Mama 5 was murdered. She was murdered on August 5th while on the Ma and Pa Trail there in Maryland. Broad daylight, on a popular trail, scary stuff. Tells you a lot about the killer. Has no fear. No abandon, and is probably very impulsive, and he's still on the loose. There was a video released of the suspect leaving a home invasion he had committed back in March in Los Angeles, where a young child was assaulted. There's still no arrest in this case, no named suspect. His DNA was put into the national database. It did not come back with a match. However, that DNA was linked to that home invasion, which led investigators to conclude he's done 2 violent acts. So far, probably more than we know at this point, given the severity of both of those, home invasion and then a murder on a trail in the daylight on the weekend. Last month, investigators said that they had a leak that took them to Washington, D.C. Kind of seems like it's gone quiet again. But now Rachel's mom, Patty Morin, is speaking out. She has spoken to several media outlets expressing how hard it is that no arrests have been made in the murder of her daughter. She told 11 News Investigates, the longer it goes, the dimmer it seems to get justice. We're so connected that it physically hurts us that she's not here. I know it's a fact, but I can't accept it yet. Miss Patty homeschooled all 6 of her kids, and she said that Rachel was sensitive, insecure, and until just a few years ago, really struggled with stuttering. She said that gave Rachel compassion towards others since she herself had struggled so much with it. She also told WJZ that Rachel was a feisty little booger, and she said, I meant that in the kindest way. As far as the Ma and Pa Trail, she said, we actually lived a block away from the trail for over 10 years when they were younger. As a family, we would go there every day. I always told Rachel to never go on the trail alone. Even though it's safe, just don't do that. She didn't see herself as being a target or at risk for anything. She lived life as Rachel. She loved people and was outgoing, so that made me scared for her, and I would tell her all the time, Rachel, don't walk the trail by yourself. She also said, I've seen my daughter since they found her, but seeing her and accepting it are like 2 different things. She said the man in the video isn't anybody that they know. It's believed that murder was just random, a random attack. She went on to say his mother knows who this man is. And my question is, why? Why are you protecting him? She also told Ashley Banfield from News Nation, if that were my son, I would know it was him. I believe that if the mother has seen that video, she knows that's her son. Maybe she can't believe that's him, but if that's her son, she should say something. She's actually empowering him to take another life somewhere. Somebody has to know who that is. I completely agree. She told WJZ that this is the worst thing a mother can experience. It's like a part of you is dying or has died, and it's really devastating. I can't imagine, y'all. Rachel is a mom of 5, and Rachel's mom said she worries about Rachel's daughter who has autism. She asks when mom is coming back and keeps saying, I need her. I need my friend. And that's very hard. How can you explain something when they can't comprehend it? Heartbreaking, just absolutely terrible. She said, I know over time people will forget details. People will forget Rachel. I don't want Rachel to end up as a folder on somebody's desk because people will move on to the next sensational story. I don't want that for her. Hartford County Sheriff's Office has 10 of their 30 investigators working on this case. The reward is at $30,000 due to an anonymous donor. And the Hartford County Sheriff, Jeffrey Gaylor, told 11 News Investigates, this one is a whodunit. And we know who did it. We just need the name to put behind the video that's out there. The sheriff said that an analysis of reach on social media about this case shows that 18 million people from around the world have seen something on the story involving Rachel. There's a $30,000 reward, and anybody with information is asked to call the Hartford County Sheriff's Office at 410-836-7788 or email a tip to investigators at rmtips@hartfordcounty.gov. hartfordsheriff.org. Moving on to Brooks Houck. He is charged in the murder of Crystal Rogers, who is the mother of his child. She went missing over 8 years ago, back in 2015. She was last seen on his family farm. Now, he had been a suspect for a very, very long time, but was just arrested back in September. Her body has never been found. Joseph Lawson, the first man who was charged in the murder of Crystal Rogers, was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence in early September. He was due in court last week for a pretrial conference, but that hearing was delayed until January 5th of next year. There was no reason given for that delay. I kind of wonder if it's because he's cooperating in this case against Brooks, possibly his brother Nick. So far, they haven't given any reason. He was arrested, his connection to the murder, but those are pretty serious charges. Got a feeling that guy is singing like a canary because, as you saw, it wasn't long after he was arrested that Brooks was arrested. And people that have followed this case since the beginning have been waiting on that day for a very long time. Brooks's request to have his $10 million bond lowered was denied. Brooks's attorney filed a motion asking for the judge, Judge Sims, to be removed or to recuse himself. In the filing, it says impartiality might reasonably be questioned from the perspective of a reasonable observer who is informed of all the surrounding facts and circumstances. The sensationalism surrounding this case was fueled in large part due to local law enforcement's remarkable decision to release portions of their open investigation, including Mr. Houck's police interview to the public during an ongoing investigation after naming Mr. Houck as a main suspect. He also references a 6-year-old family court order involving Brooks's girlfriend who was fighting for custody of her child. In the order, Judge Sims, the same judge that's over Brooks's case, was also over this custody case. He said this court is simply astonished that Crystal Maupin would want a relationship with Brooks Houck, who is the prime suspect in the disappearance and presumed death of his previous girlfriend. His attorney goes on to say, based on the contempt for Mr. Houck as expressed in this family court order written 6 years before Mr. Houck was even charged, it is clear that Judge Sims has prejudiced Mr. Houck's guilt and is not and could not possibly be impartial. We got 3 cases right now where defense attorneys are asking that judges be removed from these cases. Crazy stuff, y'all. That's it for the news updates. Again, I'll update on the Kouri Richens hearing at some point, maybe a YouTube short. Don't forget to hit subscribe, like, share the video to friends that may not know I exist on here, but you think might like some updates on cases or some deep dives or trial coverage. I will be back at you late tonight with a wrap up of day 3 in Caitlin Armstrong's murder trial. Testimony still going on, and her sister, I'm anticipating, maybe hits the stand today. We'll keep you updated. In the meantime, hope you have a good rest of your day. We'll see you soon.